Could this be where the AI bubble finally pops? Could this be the single factor that pops the AI bubble? That's going to be the subject of this video. And I'm not trying to be a bear, but I'm just saying that there is a percentage chance that this could be what pops the AI bubble. And it's actually because of AI kind of suffering from its own success, if that makes sense. So I'm going to make a historical analogy, and I just want to kind of, I'll bring you to AI afterwards, right? So, right, back then, mathematicians calculated that the Earth could only support, let's say, 1 billion people, right? This figure has changed. It started off less, and now it's more, right? But back then, at a certain time, people calculated that the Earth could support only 1 billion people. And how they got this calculation was they said the Earth has only, let's say, X amount of farmland, right? And we'll draw that as a box. And then we know that, and then back then they assumed that every, let's say, I don't know, like every square meter could support one person, right? These weren't the actual numbers, but this is just for example's sake, right? Every square meter could support one person. Okay, that whatever, it doesn't matter. But because the Earth is only so many square meters, it's some finite square meters, then based off of that calculation, we calculate that Earth can only support 1 billion people. Well, now Earth has 7+ billion people. So how's that possible? When their calculations were 100% correct, right? Their calculations were completely correct. There was no error in their calculations. The error came from their assumptions. They assumed that this farmland, right, had a constant yield. Constant yield. And they did not account for innovation, invention, etc., right? They didn't account for, back then, let's say they could only squeeze out like a potato and an orange from 1 square meter, and now they can squeeze out 10 potatoes and 10 oranges from 1 square meter, right? So now this actually increases in yield, which now means that this 1 square meter can now support, instead of 1 person, it can support, let's say, 10 people or 110 people, right? This 1 square meter can now support, obviously it's not that much, but like it can support a lot more people, which is why we're at 7 billion plus population and growing, right? Now, because now I want to use this analogy and talk about what am I talking about? AI investment into energy, into compute power, into I don't know, data centers, right? Whatever, right? I think those are the same thing, but whatever, right? So we're investing a lot, right? So like just think about Oracle, think about NVIDIA, think about all those things, right? These companies have a lot of money going into it, and there's also a lot of investments going back into itself, right? But what happens when we, through innovation, through like changing an algorithm or like changing training process through, I don't know, like updating how we train, I guess that's training process, but like through making this training process a lot more efficient, right? If we can make this a lot more efficient, then we don't need all this energy, all this compute power, all these data centers that are going like springing up left, right, and center, right? You don't need the core weaves. You don't need like all those many chips. It doesn't matter. Like if you have a, let's say you're going from point A to point B, and it's, I don't know, like 10 miles, right? Then even like you only, like if you have a chip or if you have a car that can drive like, I don't know, 1 million miles an hour versus a car that can drive 100 miles an hour, right? You don't need this 1 million miles an hour car. Sorry, you can't read it, but like 1 million mph versus a 1,000, we'll say 1,000 mph, right? You don't get much of an increase from these two things. So even if you get like a In the case of AI, if you get like NVIDIA chip, like 100.0, right? How much more efficient can you make this training? Like how much more useful would this be compared to the 50x, right? Compared to the 25x, when you decrease the amount of energy that you need. So I guess my examples are kind of vague or kind of confusing, but I'm basically saying that there comes a point when you don't need to make it that much more efficient because, one, you already like you hit a kind of like a threshold to how much faster you need your compute power to be, right? And right now we're training so much data that it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of compute power, it takes a lot of energy in order to train a model. But there's if I'm sure that through human ingenuity, right, we'll be able to make that more efficient. We'll be able to require less resources in the same way that we require less land, we require less resources to support a human being in terms of food, in terms of food, right? So how do we get this, right? I have this idea of, currently we're doing AGI, right? Artificial General Intelligence. And what artificial general intelligence is you have one model. And this model knows everything. Everything, right? It knows everything, right? But I have this idea, I have this proposed idea. I'm not an AI scientist, but like this is just where my mind is going. I have this idea of ASI, right? Where ASI is one model that knows everything about one specific sector. And I think that this could be really big in reducing the cost of energy. Now, I know you're. Oh, sorry. Whoops, my bad. I know you didn't watch this for a AI tutorial, I guess. But basically, what you have to know is that in order to train one model, right? A model is basically just a formula of y equals x1 plus x2 plus x3 plus ... x 1 billion plus ... up to x 1 trillion, right? There are models that have 1 trillion parameters, and this takes incredibly long to train, a lot of, like, a crap ton of energy, a crap ton of compute power to train this, right? And this is what we have for one model of AGI, right? That is much harder to train than even if you only had 1 billion parameters. This would be significantly less, like, I guess, resource intensive to train than 1 trillion parameters. So what I'm saying is that, let me do another analogy. Sorry, crap ton of analogies, but so let's say your friend asks you a question, right? Your friend asks you a question. If you know the answer, you'll reply directly and you give him the answer. And if you don't know the question, what do? Well, you'll ask a series of friends, right? And then eventually one of them will have an answer. So this is Q, there's a question going here. And then one of your friends who has an answer will give you back the answer. And this person will now give this person back the answer, right? That is how currently, like, humans deal with this problem of, like, one person not knowing everything. So in my opinion, that in like real life, people are actually a form of ASI, artificial specific intelligence, where they don't know everything, but they know a specific amount of stuff, and they're able to, but then they're also able to ask other ASIs, which are just other people, for their knowledge, right? You have your experts in medicine, right? Your doctor. You have your experts in, finance, right? Your economist. I mean, there are no expert economists, but whatever. That's fake, but whatever. You have your experts in, cars, right? Your mechanic or whatever. You're able to ask all these people. And you have to realize that this takes so much energy. Do you know how much energy a person's brain takes? It is the equivalent to a light bulb. Right? It's the equivalent to a light bulb. That's how much energy your brain takes in order to power itself. Compare a light bulb, that looks weird, so I'm just going to erase it. But light bulb, right? Light bulb, right? Compared to this, which takes how many data centers, how much time, how much energy, how much compute power. So if we can somehow imitate this graph with AI, right, where we don't need an AGI, but instead we just need like one type of like, I'd say artificial manager who is now connected to a bunch of artificial specific intelligences, who could also be connected to a bunch of artificial specific intelligences, right? So you have this type of graph that kind of leans out, and then you can just propagate the answer back to this person who then answers the person asking the question. That could be one way that we reduce the energy. I'm not saying this is the way, but I know that through human ingenuity, right, through perseverance, I'm sure that we will be able to find a way to lower the energy costs, to lower the compute costs of training this giant model, which we currently have as AGI. That is my theory, that we will be able to make this cheaper, right? And now when you have NVIDIA, which is at a $4.5 trillion market cap, and then you basically just reduce the demand for it completely. Like you reduce the demand for it to significantly, not completely, significantly, right? When you have this shoe dropping, and then you have Oracle dropping, right? You have all these other data center plays, all these other energy plays, all these other quote unquote shovel plays, right? Dropping. That could be where the bubble pops. Now again, I'm not an AI scientist. I'm just saying that it is possible that this could be a way that the AI bubble pops, right? This is just like I'm not like an expert. I know a little bit, but like again, to train one model with 1 billion parameters is much cheaper than 1 trillion, and 1 billion and train 1 million is much cheaper than 1 billion. To train 10 1 million, to train 10 1 million parameter models is much cheaper than 1 billion. To train 10 1 billion, even to train like 1,000 1 billion model parameters, or 1 billion parameter models is cheaper than 1 trillion. Because like this is super energy intensive, right? It requires so many resources. I think that this is a possible way, wherever I wrote it, that like this, imitating this graph is a possible way to reduce energy consumption. And even if it isn't, I'm sure that we'll figure out a way to make it less energy intensive. Now there is one caveat, which I'm saying, if you reduce the requirements, right? If you reduce the cost of training a model, or of just AI, like creating AI models, then you will have an increase in demand, right? If you have an increase in demand, that the increase in demand might actually, will, what is it called? Like, take over, or that increase in demand will, what's the word? Negate. I'll just say negate. That increase in demand will negate the decrease in costs, right? And then that will kind of like overall lead to like a balance in what happened, like the effect that it has on those energy suppliers, those compute power suppliers, those data center suppliers, right? So that is like kind of a another way of seeing this, which would mean that there is no bubble popping in this scenario. But I'm just showing you guys that there is a way, there is a path in which we don't need that demand. We don't need all those data centers or all those things, and that could lead to a domino effect of just a bunch of companies instantly losing a lot of market cap, or instantly losing a lot of demand for their services. But again, this is just thought piece. So and also very different from my normal videos or my normal companies or sectors that I talk about. I just randomly had a thought, and I have access to a whiteboard on my break at work. So that's it. What do you guys think? I honestly think that it's possible, because people back then, they thought that, there could only be like 100 million people that could live on Earth based off of how we're farming right now. And now we're at 7 billion people. Like, it's just, I feel like it's the same thing in terms of energy usage, in terms of like resource usage for AI as well. But I don't know. I just want to know what your opinions are. Is my logic completely flawed? It could be because I'm not an expert, but that's just what I think. So, especially with like this kind of like circle jerk of like AI being invested into AI, which invests into the first AI company, and it's just, I don't know. It's just really weird, and I'm just kind of really suspicious. But those are just my thoughts. All right, if you have any, please leave your thoughts and comments below. But otherwise, peace.